Coming up, what will America look like in the future under President-elect Donald Trump? We discuss that tonight on America's Hope, which starts now.
This is America's Hope from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Kelly Wright.
Hi everyone, I'm Kelly Wright, and welcome to a brand new hour of America's Hope. Glad that you could join us this hour and listen wherever you are. I do sincerely hope that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. When it comes to things that matter to the American family, we're concerned about our economy, we're concerned about our health care, and we are concerned about our national security and the defense of this nation. Oh, and by the way, we're concerned about immigration. So many things to deal with in terms of what's happening domestically and even abroad as it relates to our adversaries. Tonight, we're going to talk about the way forward. We'll be talking to Mark Meckler about that and how he feels from the inside looking out in the wake of the election of President-elect Donald Trump. And then we're going to talk to Christian Briggs about how he sees the economy. Will it grow? Will it become stronger under a new president? Let's get started. Welcome to America's Hope. My first guest is Mark Meckler. And look, let's get into talking about what's happening since this election. There's a lot of excitement, and as the election settles, we are seeing President-elect Donald Trump and his proposed cabinet moving very swiftly to make a smooth transition. So right now, let's take a chance right now to reflect on the last 8 years we've been through. And let's learn a lot looking backward, but also seeing where we're going in terms of our forward momentum. And Mark is a great person to come in to talk about all of this because Mark has been doing a lot of work along the lines of making sure that America stays committed to its Constitution to ensure liberty for future generations. By the way, he's president and co-founder of Convention of States Action, the largest nationwide movement seeking to call the first ever Article 5 Convention of States. But Mark, let's begin with where things stand right now as you look ahead to what will likely take place with a new Trump presidency beginning on January 20th.
Yeah, I'm as hopeful as I've been in my entire life watching politics. I'm 62 years old. My first vote was for Ronald Reagan. So that starts with looking forward to the city on the hill, the shining city on the hill. And I feel like that's our view right now. I get a little bit of chills saying that. I'm surprised to be saying it. Frankly, things have been pretty dark for the last 8 years, even when Trump got elected the first time, because the blowback was so hard from the left. But I feel like right now the left is on its heels. When you look at the polling, Trump's approval numbers are sky high, like nothing I've ever seen. He's moving quickly. I think it's the best cabinet appointments I've ever seen in my life. So I am very hopeful for the next 4 years.
And what do you see within the next 4 years that would be, look, I don't want to stack it in terms of order, but there are some priorities that the Trump administration will have to address in terms of what's happening around the world and how it affects us domestically as well as foreign.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we'll be making the Trump tax cuts permanent. The economy can't afford to be hit with the expiration of those tax cuts. And I think there's bipartisan support for that. So I think that's an easy one to put up on the chalkboard. I think Trump will do that quickly and Congress will act quickly on that. I think then he's going to have to address our military. Our military is in real trouble and we're in a dangerous world. I think Pete Hegseth, who's an endorser of our project, is the right man to do that. He's a warrior. I think he's going to go at it with a warrior's look. He's going to go through, he's going to remove all the DEI and all that stuff from the military and go back to being a deadly fighting machine like it's supposed to be. And then I think Trump's going to address the world, and the world is already falling into place before Trump actually even does anything. I think he's going to address the Middle East and unleash Israel, let Israel know they have our full support for finishing what they've been doing. I think he's going to help finish the war in Ukraine and really bring that to a settlement that needs to reach a settlement. And I think he's going to take a strong posture against China, and China is going to back down. They're going to have to. They've been moving forward because of a weak president, and Trump is going to be anything but a weak president.
Yeah, so Mark, let's dig down into that a little bit more. When it comes to the economy, like you said, you believe that there would be bipartisan support, but keeping in mind that the Senate and the House are now controlled by a Republican majority, although it might be razor thin, it's still enough for them to enact everything that has to be done in regard to our economy. How do you see that shaping up in terms of how they'll get this done? Because it's not like they can just come in and do it immediately, or am I mistaken? Can they do it immediately with certain measures that they can put into place to get the tax cuts staying in place beyond 2025?
Yeah, I think if they stick with just keeping those tax cuts in place, they can get that done pretty quickly. If they start to fuss around with that bill, I think they'll have trouble with Democrats and maybe with some Republicans. So I think it's doing it right and being very surgical about it. There's a lot of things that the president can do with executive orders, and he's going to do a lot of that. He's going to remove regulation. This week, he talked about anybody who wants to invest $1 billion in a project, he's going to remove red tape, and he can do a lot of that with executive orders. We see that executives around the country are ready to invest. 80% of the executive roundtable, the CEOs roundtable, are saying that they're ready to go and they're hopeful about the economy. So I think a lot of this stuff is going to be done by executive order. And then, Kelly, also there is the tool of reconciliation, and anything that is budgetary is not going to require cloture in the Senate, meaning 51 votes gets it across the line in the Senate. So I think they're going to stuff as much as they can into a budget bill without cloture as they possibly can to get things moving fast. And I think you're going to see the economy really jump-started here in the first 6 months.
Look, there's a lot of money out there through the infrastructure bill that was passed during the Biden administration. There's a lot of money left out there on the table. Can they pull some of that in to structure through reconciliation the budgetary guardrails that they need for keeping the tax cuts in place and perhaps even extending it?
Yeah, I think they can. They can claw a bunch of that back or reallocate a bunch of that. I know Trump's going to have to do that in regard to building the wall. We've seen in the last week them trying to auction off, the Biden administration trying to auction off what's left of the wall instead of allowing it to be built. I think Trump's going to step in very forcefully there. I think they are going to build the rest of the wall and put the other technologies in place to seal the border. You're going to see that thing slam shut immediately. That's going to be one of the immediate priorities for the administration.
Yeah, it's so important to point that out. It's one of the things that is still being discussed because that is a priority on day one for the Trump administration, as you know, with Tom Homan at the helm, should he be approved, and in all likelihood he will be. So what do you think that will look like, the mass deportation? How will this new administration conduct that, as well as build the wall and have a humane mass deportation?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just in messaging and narrative, and this is really important. And that's why they've talked about, Homan's talked about, Trump has talked about, starting with the 435,000 felons at a minimum that we know of that have come into this country. I think they're going to go after those people fast and hard. And I think that's a great idea. I think that sets the right tone for the American people. And I think it's not just going to be Tom Homan leading the way. I think choosing Kristi Noem as the face of this is a smart move, because I think she's going to take a more gentle approach in the media than Tom Homan might take. But I think they're going to go after the criminals first. And then I do think that the narrative is correct on, look, we don't want to separate families at all. And if families are going to be separated by deportation, then the whole family should leave. And I think most Americans support that when we look at the numbers. And again, this is extraordinary. Americans are united in this regard. 58% of Americans support mass deportations. And so I think you're going to see that. I think they're going to follow through.
Our military is out there in various hotspots. For example, Syria. We still have 900 troops there, which many Americans were not aware of. And they're there to keep a lid on ISIS from mounting another comeback. It's so important given what's happened in Syria, as you know, Mark, with Bashar al-Assad fleeing the country and leaving it to the hands of STS, which swooped in, and they were able to actually liberate a lot of people there. While there's a lot of celebrating going on, there are still Christians and Alawites who are very concerned about, wait a minute, this shoe might drop on us because we don't know what this new jihadist regime will do. Do you have concerns about that and how the Trump administration is keeping an eye on this?
Yeah, I do. Look, I think this is an incredibly complicated situation. And anybody that thinks that they can summarize it in 30 seconds doesn't understand the history there. You probably have 8 different regions in Syria. You mentioned ISIS. There are over 10,000 ISIS prisoners held by the Kurds in northern Syria. Northern Syria borders on Turkey. Turkey has now taken over effective control of over 8,000 kilometers of territory. I mean, this is an incredible amount of territory. And we should be worried about those 10,000 ISIS fighters, being released to do the damage that they would obviously do. So the U.S. has an interest there. Obviously, you also have a border with Israel. Israel has an interest there, and anything that Israel has an interest in, we have to pay attention to as well. I think it's going to be a mess. I think it's unlikely to be better than Bashar al-Assad as far as just geopolitical stability, but it's going to take some time to wash out, and America's going to have to be vigilant.
Mess is the operative word, Mark. I couldn't agree with you more. It is a mess, and it will take a while to actually sort it out and even clean up the mess. What's noteworthy is that Israel has already attacked chemical weapon stockpiles that Bashar al-Assad had. That could have fallen to the hands of any malevolent force that could have actually used those chemical weapons as Bashar al-Assad did on his own people. Look, I'm going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about more of how you see the way forward for the new administration that's putting a smile on your face and some hope in your heart. Talking to Mark Meckler. We'll be back with more on America's Hope. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm talking to Mark Meckler. He's president and co-founder of Convention of States Action. It is the largest nationwide movement seeking to call the first ever Article 5 Convention of States. In our previous segment, you were talking about how you have this hope and you have this feeling of positivity for the first time that you can remember since voting for Ronald Reagan. That's a long time coming, my friend. The train is getting ready to come into the station on January 20th, and then it's going to be pulling out and doing a lot of extensive work across the country and around the world. We already know that on Inauguration Day, the president-elect may have visitors from adversaries to attend his convention. Talk to me about that. The possibilities of some of our adversaries could actually be front and center to watch this historic inauguration.
Yeah, I mean, this is an absolutely historic inauguration. He's only the second president in American history, Grover Cleveland being the first to be reelected after losing a reelect. So that in and of itself is historic. Donald Trump is already reshaping the world. You have foreign leaders already paying their respects and getting on the phone with him and wanting to talk to him about what the future looks like. He's saying things about foreign policy that are radically different from the current administration. So he's reshaping the world, and they know they're going to have to deal with Donald Trump. That is very different than dealing with Joe Biden and his administration. America is going to come at the world with a posture of strength and confidence, and that's the only thing that brings peace in the world, when America is strong and confident and projects its power around the world. So I'm excited about what I believe is a period of stability coming to world politics.
As you look at it from that perspective, how do you think the adversaries who have tried to stymie our development as a nation, and they likely will continue to do that in terms of our cybersecurity, as well as our economy, and even our elections, there will still be the likelihood of some meddling going on, and also trying to outpace us in terms of the competition that we have globally on the economic scale. Most notably, I'm talking about China. What do you anticipate from them going forward?
I think they're just going to behave a lot better. When you look at the world, I mean, I kind of liken it to mom and dad have been out for 4 years and out playing around, and the babysitter's been home and babysitting America and not doing a very good job. And the kids around the world have gotten really out of hand. They know they can do pretty much anything and get away with it. Unfortunately, Joe Biden and the Biden administration have done very little for world stability. Every time they give aid to one of our allies, they slow walk that aid, allowing our enemies to act with impunity. I think the biggest thing about Donald Trump is people know he'll act and they don't know exactly what he'll do. There's a now sort of infamous story about a meeting with Putin, and Putin was talking about Ukraine, and Donald Trump said, we'll strike Moscow if you invade Ukraine. And Putin said, no, you won't. And Trump just smiled and said, well, I might. And I think Putin believed that he might. Like, people just don't know exactly what he'll do. And that kind of uncertainty, walking softly but carrying a big stick, I think that's going to cause the bad players in the world to behave for at least the next 4 years.
Yeah, and good of you to bring in a quote about Teddy Roosevelt carrying that big stick, and certainly President-elect Donald Trump is someone who's not shy about doing that. And you brought up Putin. That was going to lead to my next question about Ukraine. We do know that the president of Hungary recently visited Mar-a-Lago. It seems like a lot of leaders are going to Mar-a-Lago these days to meet with the president-elect to give him well wishes, as well as to see how they can work with him and the United States. And as you know, the president of Turkey knows Vladimir Putin. What do you think is going on in terms of how President-elect Trump is trying to solve the Ukraine issue before getting into office, as he promised to do while campaigning?
I mean, I think he's putting pressure on both the parties. I think Vladimir Putin, as I just described, knows that he has a strong and unpredictable adversary in Donald Trump. And I think Zelensky understands that it's not going to be a permanent gravy train any longer. The American people don't like that. They don't want to continue to fund it. And it's not healthy. I mean, when you are going to help one of your allies, one of the questions should always be, okay, what's the end game? One of the things that's really frustrated me as somebody that's not necessarily opposed to helping Ukraine in this war is, what's the end game? What's the off ramp? And one of the things that Joe Biden said, which actually really scared me, is he said, we're in this as long as it takes. And the question was, as long as it takes to do what? And we never had that defined by the Biden administration. We've essentially reached a stalemate. It's going to require some, I believe, some territorial mix up here. I think Ukraine is going to give up some territory to Russia, and that's where it's going to end up being. It's time for the death and devastation to stop, and it's time for U.S. funds to quit flowing to Ukraine as well.
So, look, we've been talking about things that have happened domestically as well as foreign. Where do you think the ethos or the psyche is of the American people right now?
I think the American people are turning inward. And by that, I don't mean isolationists, because I just don't think that's where the American people are at. Generally, there's a fringe that's there, but I think they're turning inward. They want their country restored. They understand that we've been through a period of suffering, a long period of suffering, which frankly goes back well before the Biden administration, through COVID, into the Obama administration. They're ready to make America great again. They want to see our economy humming. They want to see regulations removed. They want to be able to live their lives with freedom and liberty. And they're looking forward to Donald Trump restoring all of those things. I think people are hopeful. All the polling shows people are hopeful. One of the things that's so interesting, Kelly, when you look at markets are largely driven not by fundamentals, as we wish they might be, but by psychology. And the psychology of the American people right now is largely positive about where we're headed.
And, you talk about the psychology of the American people. One thing is true. While President-elect has won a decisive election, popular vote, electoral college vote, the bottom line is the American people, with that kind of psychology of feeling better and more hopeful, they've got to understand that we have to roll up our sleeves to help our government be a better government and to help our people become a better nation. So that means the American people have to get with some sort of different program as well, in the way they think, the way they act, and the way they behave towards one another.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Look, we are not the enemy of our fellow citizens, and we've got to get back to that. And I think one of the important ways that we get back to that is by getting rid of the centralization of power in the federal government. Federalism was intended to be sort of a pressure relief valve for the conflicts among American people. New York is very different than California, which is very different than Texas or Oklahoma. And we need to go back to a system that allows us to live differently within our own states and not have everything dictated by Washington, D.C. I think that'll allow people to get along a lot better.
Which brings up the Article 5 Convention of States. Talk to me about that. And does that still have value and meaning for such a time as this?
Yeah, I think it has more than ever. Look, Donald Trump, I believe, is going to do a lot of good things in Washington, D.C. The administration is going to be successful, but most of what he's going to do can be reversed in 5 minutes of the next Democrat administration. And so if we want to make those things permanent, if we want to do things like do away with the Department of Education or energy or health and human services, return those powers to the states. If we really do want to get term limits, I don't believe we're going to get those things from Washington, D.C. or a balanced budget amendment. It's going to take the American people stepping up and do that. It takes 34 states to call a convention of states. That's what our organization does. So far, we've had 19 states already do that. We're well past the halfway mark. We have a huge number of people going into the administration that are in support of this. J.D. Vance, Mike Huckabee, a mutual friend of ours, is a good friend of Convention of States, as is Pete Hegseth, Brooke Rollins going to Ag. Even Caroline Leavitt, the new press secretary, is a supporter of Convention of States. So I expect that we're going to see in the next few years a Convention of States get called, and we're going to impose restrictions on the federal government from outside.
So for people watching this, Mark, explain to them what the Article 5 of our Constitution really stipulates.
Yeah, Article 5 says that there are two ways to amend the Constitution. One is Congress can propose amendments, and we know Congress is never going to propose term limits on itself or a balanced budget or power restrictions on itself. That's just not human nature.
You're talking about holding our government accountable. And if we are a government by the people and for the people, there has to be accountability and responsibility, right? Mark, how do we overcome our political and our racial divide in this nation?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are related, but I think they're two different things. And I think one of the biggest things on the racial divide is to stop talking about it so much. You know, Kelly, I know you've traveled a lot. I've traveled all over the country. It's not to say there isn't racism. As long as there are human beings, there will be racism. But I travel a lot, and that's from the deep south. Yes, I travel from the deep south to the far north. And everywhere I go, what I see is the majority of people don't really pay very much attention to race. I sit down at dinner tables all over the country and break bread with my fellow Americans of all colors, all genders, all religions, all ideologies. That's the majority of Americans right now. We need to go back to that. We need to go back to what Dr. King told us. You know, when I was a young man and I was in school, we were taught that you judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And it was a given. I mean, it wasn't even something that we discussed or debated. It just was. And that's how I grew up. That's how I went to high school. We need to get back to a nation that's like that.
Yeah, I love that. Look, break bread together, sit down at the table of brotherhood, talk to each other from all walks of life, all shades, all stripes, actually elevating who we are as one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Look, having discussed this, I could talk to you a lot longer, Mark, but what is your hope for America?
My hope is that we see that sort of reconciliation. And it's incredible to be here with you, even talking about the possibility of that we put the things that divide us behind us and we move forward in unity for the betterment of all citizens. And this is the most important thing we can do, is focus on elevating our fellow citizens. We're going to do that by working together.
Hey, I'm praying for that, my friend. Praying for it and hoping for it. From our lips to God's ears, let's see what happens for our nation. He is Mark Meckler. He's president and co-founder of Convention of States Action, the largest nationwide movement seeking to call the first ever Article 5 Convention of States. But more importantly, he's an American who loves God and country. Mark, thank you for being on America's Hope.
Thanks, Kelly. God bless you.
God bless you too. We're coming back with more after this. And welcome back to America's Hope. Continuing now with our look at the way forward as the new President Trump administration prepares to come into office on January 20th of 2025. Joining me now is Christian Briggs. He is the CEO of Hard Asset Management Incorporated. He's a distinguished leader in the financial sector, renowned for his strategic acumen and commitment to delivering exceptional investment outcomes with a career spanning more than 2 decades. Christian, good of you to join us this hour. We are, of course, in the holiday season, so let me just start off saying happy holidays to you, Merry Christmas to you. How's that right now?
Well, thank you, Kelly. Thanks for having me. I've always enjoyed being on your show, and I tell you, it's an interesting Christmas with Donald Trump back in. It's like Trump 47, we're going to do this all over again, he said the other night.
Yes, he did. Tell me what you think about Trump 47 compared to Trump 45 and Biden 46.
Well, okay, so Trump 45 was kind of like a freshman at high school, right? Let's think about that for a second. Middle school is one thing, but when you go into the big league high school, now you're like, oh, I'm a freshman. I'm going to rock this world. High school is great. Next thing he knows, like, I'm being impeached twice. What are you talking about? I got to lower taxes. I've got to lower economics regulations. I've got to lower the barriers of entry for small businesses. He got tied up. But here's Trump 47. Now he's in university. Now he's a professor. He gets everything he needs to do because he learned from the first term to do the second term. And I said this once here recently. I was down in Mar-a-Lago last week. I said, you've got a man who knows business. He now knows politics, but you know what he really knows? He knows how the swamp works.
What do you anticipate? Well, first of all, let me start with where the retail sales are since we're in the holiday season. As you know, the bulk of our retail giants depend on this holiday season from Thanksgiving to Christmas to actually bolster their economies so that they can continue to keep people employed and continue to make some gainful revenue. Retail sales rose at a healthy pace last month in the latest sign of the U.S. economy. What does that say to you about the way forward?
Okay, let's take those retail sales and put those into context. So we all know that inflation has increased products and services by at least 10 to 15% over the last 24 months. Let's be realistic about what real inflation is. When you add housing, energy, and food costs back into both the core, the PPI, and the CPI, the real numbers are closer to that 7, maybe even 8% annualized inflation. When you look at November inflation on the groceries alone, we had a 22 to 31% spike in 1 month on groceries. So the retail sales may be up, but I want you to make sure that we take this in context. It's because the cost of those items are up substantially. The services industry alone, services index, is way high. So when we start doing retail sales is up 2%, 4%, even 5%. Measure that against the cost of the increase of the products and services we're buying. See, the way you really want to look at some of this stuff is the volume there. Are we selling more widgets? Are we selling more products? What are we selling? And if we are selling less, but for more, are the retail sales really up? See, that's the key. And I believe in the fourth quarter, retail sales are going to be down, especially in automotives and consumer-oriented goods. I think we're going to see a little bit of a slowdown because the credit card debts are so high.
So what do you anticipate the incoming Trump administration to do to turn that around, albeit the president-elect Donald Trump has stated that it's going to be, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he said it would be difficult to kind of reverse some of those grocery market prices that are causing some sticker shock for average families.
Okay, that's a really good question, Kelly, because what can Trump do? Let me tell you the damage that was done first, because you gotta remember, we have to identify the virus. We're seeing the symptoms, but what's the virus? Because in order to be able to get rid of the symptoms, the virus has to be killed. But let's go back to where it was. When you have $1 trillion in overburdensome regulatory mandates that were put through in the last 4 years, and I say $1 trillion, that's how much economic prosperity, growth, and or GDP was sucked out of the economy in 4 years. So now take that out. Again, we've got a 38% decline in profits on small businesses with a 100% increase in cost of doing business over 4 years. So when you start to think about what can Trump do, he's right. He's always right about just about everything, because sometimes he won't explain why he says it, but then later on it determines he was actually right on the money. He said the pain points are going to be as follows. Walmart 2 weeks ago warned that grocery prices are going to escalate in 25 at an unprecedented rate. Well, last month they were up to as much as 31%. So Trump, in order to be able to eliminate some of the things that Biden created, he's got to have beef production, poultry, pork. He's going to have all of these things increase. You realize we're down to a 60% low on production for beef, a 20-year low on poultry. Do you know that we're at the worst orange juice and orange juice concentrate harvest in 100 years? Why? EPA, FDA, over regulatory environment that created a burdensome environment. I want to say environment. I'm trying to be very kind here. Basically, what Biden did was he train wrecked the food, and the meat and really the agricultural industry quite a bit. He pretty much handicapped to the point where they just can't grow it economically.
Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk visiting Capitol Hill a couple of weeks ago, talking about DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. Will that play a significant role in perhaps helping the government get untangled from itself in order to be more efficient, more effective, and actually turn around and boost this economy?
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go walk right into DOGE. Let's talk about that. What they're doing right now is they're looking at the books from Treasury all the way, which is the very top. At the end of the day, Treasury is the bank for the government. The Federal Reserve provides financing when needed out to the marketplace. Treasury receives that and then pays the agencies, pays all the various parts of the government. You got to look at the Treasury's books, which they are. In my opinion, I'm going to tell you what they've seen so far. The books are cooked. We have seen deficit spending. You saw that huge increase. We had a 62+% increase in deficit spending over the highest estimate from just 6 months ago, back in November. And even for this quarter, it's going to be monstrous, especially with the higher interest rate environment. So when they're going to go in, they're going to say, okay, we're running this like a business. Where do we cut? That's the hard question. So think about, we're going to cut Medicare, Medicaid, welfare, food stamps, military, VA. Where are you going to cut? We are now a 60% economy dependent upon either federal and or state government spending. Kelly, you cannot run a business where you're subsidizing it through deficit spending. You're borrowing money to keep an economy going that's fragile at best. So I think they're going to cut in, first thing is government waste. That's going to be the first thing they're going to cut, is going to be government waste and way we do the bidding system for products and services to the government. That'll be number one. Number two, they're going to cut agencies completely out.
You know, it's mind-boggling, Christian, as you talk about this, that we are $36 trillion in debt as a government, as a superpower. That is not good national security on our income, on our growth as a nation. How do we correct that? Because it seems to me it took us a while to get here, and it's going to take us a while to claw our way out of this kind of debt.
Okay, how do we cut that debt? All right, that's a great question. Joe Biden, in the last 4 years, has hired about 2.5 to 3 million full-time federal workers. That was pretty much the bulk of full-time employment that was measured each month when we get our little monthly employment. You saw recently in the last 24, 48 hours where they just revised the entire second quarter employment numbers were revised down. There really is no increase in employment. So when he's going to go in there and he's going to surgically try to find the ways, or at least the cuts, let's just talk about the cuts. Federal government alone is so bloated. It reminds me of the story. When you reach a 51 or 52% of the society that doesn't pay taxes, you have a problem. That's where the measure of money that comes into whatever the central bank is to be able to put back into the economy is not sufficient. You're subsidizing it. Kelly, we're at over 63% of America doesn't pay taxes. So what Trump's going to have to do is he's going to have to cut first the federal government, so they cut the spending. If you cut the spending, you can lower the taxes. You lower the taxes, the GDP goes up. The GDP goes up, guess what? You have higher revenues. Higher revenues can pay down debt. That means you're not deficit spending. It's that simple. Start at the federal level, cut the employees. I read an article not long ago where there are as many as 12 people on the payroll to change a light bulb, literally a light bulb, because they're all unionized. And I asked myself, is it 11 people holding the ladder and one person is actually screwing the light bulb in or out? I couldn't get an answer. But the bottom line is we've got overlapping inconsistencies in employment in the federal government, and it's time to get rid of the 11 people holding the ladder. One guy can do it, I promise you, especially if he's really tall.
Yeah, America, I'm talking to Christian Briggs. He's the CEO of Hard Asset Management. We'll take a break. When we return, we'll talk more about this and also about that word that's been bandied around from the Trump administration, tariffs. We'll talk about that and more next on America's Hope. Welcome back to America's Hope. My guest is Christian Briggs. He's the CEO of Hard Asset Management Incorporated, and we are talking about the way forward for the president-elect and his administration coming into office January 20th, 2025. It will be an historic day And right now, we already know that he's already hard at work selecting all of his cabinet members. We're waiting that for a confirmation hearing from the Senate to find out if all of them will make it in. He's appointed several people to all of the different posts. He's moving fast, quick, and in a hurry to get a job done. Christian, when it comes to the economy, he has a lot to do, as you know. We've been talking about that in our previous segment, $36 trillion in debt. It is not looking like something that you would like to have incurred from whoever has been your predecessor. Yet, he has to clean up a mess. He can't do it alone, so what will it take for the incoming administration to make it really work and get us back on sound footing financially?
Okay, so you make a really good topic here. I mean, the conversation is going to go a direction that I think some people will appreciate. And that is, he basically inherited, in my opinion, based on the economics. And so far, all of my colleagues in economics and economists around the world who I do talk to quite a bit have said the same thing. It's a bag of rocks. So he is going to have to go out there and start to measure the economics against what the downfall is going to be to try to create the prosperity value to bring the businesses here. You're going to see him lower tariffs on certain things and increase them on others. You're going to see him offer deals like the $100 billion Broadcom deal to build a factory in the United States. That is how you fill the building up with tenants. The United States is a big office building in his mind. How do we bring revenue into each and every square inch of that building? Manufacturing, Kelly. Donald Trump is a manufacturing genius. When he was in his first term, with all the obstacles, all those obstacles, he still brought 700,000 new manufacturing jobs back to America. Every dollar manufacturing, brother, it's worth $12 in economic value. That's the key, and that's the kind of man you're going to get.
President-elect has talked about tariffs. He did in the previous administration that he had, and now he plans to do it again. What will tariffs look like? What will it do? Because there are some prognosticators out there who are stating that tariffs will not work. Talk to me about how you see tariffs and the benefits they can have for the U.S. economy.
Okay, again, really good question. Tariffs can work incredibly well if they're surgically applied, which means is you don't throw a hand grenade into an arena and just ask, will there be any casualties? Of course there's going to be casualties, but you don't know where. If you surgically look at everything, and he's done this so methodically in the past, tariffs can be an incredible negotiating tool. Let's talk about Canada in the last 24, 48 hours. The second he announced 25% tariffs on all incoming products from Canada in the United States, the whole Canadian government about had a meltdown. In fact, they did have a meltdown with several of their MPs and deputy ministers resigning. Now, if that wasn't a understanding made clear from Trump to the rest of the world, then what you got to do is you got to measure that one incident with China. China's going to be looking at this going, okay, we are going to have to be very careful on how we tread now, because 70% of China's economy is what? Outside manufacturing from inside out. So if they want their products to continue to be sold in the same fashion and manner and consistency without those big tariffs being put on, they're going to have to basically bend a knee and kiss the ring of Donald Trump. And they will be willing to do that, I promise you, because the dependency that China has on the US, as does other countries, is significant. And while we still have that opportunity and that ball is always in our court, Donald Trump is going to make sure that surgically he goes in there with the help of others. And I think Elon Musk and Vivek are fabulous. I know Vivek. He's a very, very smart operator. And I know of Elon from his reputation and the bills. He's got good people. But the key is going to be, don't do too much on some and too little on others. And the people out there that have said tariffs may not work, okay, there's truth in that in some cases. There's no question. You just can't do them willy-nilly. However, if you start to move in a pretty aggressive manner on the systems, and I see this so clearly so many times in the past, Donald Trump's done this in business. He's going to be able to do it, and he's going to be able to bring down those interest rates. The only thing is, I just don't know how soon, though. That's the key, Kelly, is how soon can you bring down the interest rates? Because credit is too expensive in this current environment.
So you got to weather the storm. That's the bottom line. You got to weather the storm and get through a forecast that's not even partly cloudy. I mean, it's stormy. So you've got to get through that stormy weather. Having stated that, let's get back to big tech. We see the tech giants actually going to Mar-a-Lago, sitting down, meeting with President-elect Trump. A new frontier, a new area of people aligning themselves with this president-elect. How significant is that?
Okay, Kelly, that is as significant as it gets. You had all these tech guys paying tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to the other side, right? The other guy, in this case, Kamala Harris, Biden first. And all of a sudden, they're like, "Oh, you know what? I think we're going to go down to Mar-a-Lago and we're gonna sit down with Trump. We might even give him some little bit of that transition money." I love to see how people have come to their senses, and common sense plays in this. And that is going to be the key right there. That is, in my opinion, that's going to be the number one thing that gives Trump the leg up that will ultimately give him the edge.
So look, let me ask you then, based on everything that you see, what's your hope for America?
It's a hope, but it's also a reality check. America is the greatest economy in the world. What we've done is we've allowed ourselves to get a little bit of the euphoria, the utopia mentality, and not recognize that the money that we're spending today is our money. It's not the kids and the grandkids. They have to pay for it. They're going to pay for our debts. So what Trump's going to go in there and look at, and I know this because I've seen him work and I've read the books and I've had the opportunities to talk with him, and you have to look at the way he built his empire, right? The buildings, then going through all of the different hurdles. America's going to come back bigger and better than ever before. That's a fact. The question is how deep will the austerity be? How bad will the government cut be? It's got to happen. I read an article once years ago that said, this was about the 07-08 Greece debacle with the European Union. There is a point where everything has to come to fruition. The problem is that a lot of people aren't wanting to do it on their watch. They don't want to feel that austerity or that pain point. In this case, Trump knows. Elon Musk said it very clearly about 3 months prior to the election. If Trump wins, the equity markets are going to take a big hit. The reason he said that is because we're going to have to cut government spending. Kelly, government spending, again, federal, state level, counts for 60 cents of every dollar that's economically built or manufactured in America. If you cut out a third of that, or even a quarter of that, or let's just say 10% of that, what that's going to do is it's going to bring the markets down, but temporarily for a long term of prosperity.
Yeah, a little bit of pain out there as you're forecasting, but the pain will lead to hopefully greatness for America. Christian, as always, good to have you on. Christian Briggs, the CEO of Hart Asset Management Incorporated. Thank you for joining us, my friend, and Merry Christmas to you. Happy holidays.
You too, Kelly. Merry Christmas. I appreciate you, brother. Have a great day.
Back with more in just a moment. I'd like to thank our guests who appeared on our program, Christian Briggs and Mark Meckler. And that's our program for today. We thank you for joining us. We thank you for being a part of America's Hope. And listen, wherever you go, make sure that you keep hope alive and keep spreading love, freedom, and peace. Until next time, God bless.
In my America, my children are black and white, one shade of beautiful, so precious in God's sight. In my America, all lives matter, so let's stop the chatter that tears us apart. We are a family, together you and me, agreeing to disagree, but still live in harmony. The dream that gives hope to us is as strong as it ever was. United we stand, divided we fall. That's my America. light. We're all on common ground. Darkness gives way to light. In my America, you give more than you take. And when someone has lost their way, you lend them a hand and say, we are a family, together you and me, agreeing to disagree, but still live in harmony. The dream that gives hope to us is as strong as it ever was. United we stand, divided we fall. That's my America. We are brothers. I'm not my brother's killer, but I am your keeper. We are sisters. The greatness of our nation starts in the homes of its people. What's in your house? We are family. Together you and me, agreeing to disagree, but still live in harmony. The dream that gives hope to us is as strong as it ever was. United we stand, divided we fall. That's my America. United we stand, divided we fall. That's my America. From sea to shining sea, I believe in God, I believe in you, and I believe in we.